I had to have a heart-to-heart with my daughter this morning.
Mm-hmm. What happened?
Um, at school yesterday, the teachers informed her that there's a high probability of snow this weekend,
Oh,
and
okay. Yep.
so I picked her up from school, and she was all excited. And this morning, she's like, "Daddy, is it still gonna snow Saturday?" And I said, "Sweetie, sometimes um, life is like tabs in File Explorer. You know, sometimes people will promise them, and it looks good, but they just don't
Why
show
on
up."
earth would your teacher have said anything about this? Why
I,
on earth?
I don't know, but I had to explain that sometimes people promise things like tabs in File Explorer and then they just don't show up forever, and so this might happen with snow on Saturday. They're promising snow, but sometimes they get it wrong and they just don't show up.
See, I would have said, honey, your teacher is a lying liar who lies. And the sooner you realize that, the better we're all going to be.
I try to keep the innocence alive as best as I can. I'm
Yes, of
trying not
course.
to.
That's probably the right approach. You're a good parent. Don't listen
Yeah,
to me.
because at some point I know the soul crushing reality that Dad has no idea what he's doing with his life,
Oh,
and
that moment comes fast and hard. Let me tell you, it's not good.
well, I'm just dreading the day she's like, "Daddy, what do you do for a living?" And I have to explain that dicking around on the internet is making us paying our mortgage.
One of my son's earliest vocational aspirations was to stay home and play video games all day like dad.
Mm-hmm. Which
He was gonna.
in theory, is a career now. But it's
That's
kind of
actually that's man. Those guys make a ton of money.
yeah,
Some of them.
but it's the same thing as like saying, "Hey, I want to play in the NFL." Yes, it's technically possible you could get there,
Sure.
but it's not something
But
that you do
my son does
casually.
have a plan, or he did. He was probably 6 or 8 or something at the time. He was going to start something called the Mark Super Site.
Oh, what an interesting name!
This was going to enable him to play video games all day.
I mean, I see no fault to this plan.
Anyone can start a blog, Brad. You know.
I'll tell you what, though, it is becoming well. It's already been easy and cheap and all that stuff to start a blog, but it is even easier today than it was, say, 5 years ago.
Yeah.
It's approximately, I think, $45 to start a blog and own a domain for a year. It's like $45 now, I think, is what the cost
Yeah.
is.
Actually, honestly, the hardest and maybe the most expensive as a result issue with starting a blog today is finding a good domain name,
Oh yeah,
right? Because they're all taken,
yep, yeah. Is Mark
usually by
Supersite
squatters.
taken yet? Because I might park that for
The
when we
Mark
get
Super Site. I think he's going to go in a different direction.
yeah, yeah, Paul. So we're just gonna take the punching gloves off early or put them on. I don't know. I
The
don't know
last
what.
24 hours has been amazing for me on the site. Like, oh my God, like maybe I'm not seeing the intended humor in this post, but go please describe it.
Well, I'm not gonna say I'm right, but anyways, so there's a post to the forums, and I read just about everything on the site, but sometimes I just intentionally don't comment because I was waiting for the show for this.
Right.
BDSREV made a post that said talking about the Skylake issues with Surface, which happened 3 years ago now or 2 years ago, however many.
Yeah, years. I don't know. Yeah.
Anyway,
Sure.
many years ago. And he read my book, which you can find at beneaththesurface.com, and help me propel my career of dicking around on the internet. And
Sure.
and a big part of the book, which, mind you, Paul edited, so he's intimately familiar with it, is the
I've
Skylake
read this
issue.
book at least 3 times.
Yeah, is the Skylake issue. And granted, anyway, so the controversy here is, and Paul and I talked about this transparently a little bit before the show. Um, the point of interest, if you will, in this is that Paul did a lot of reporting during the Skylake debacle, what we refer to as in the trenches reporting, because it's going on. You're reporting the war as it's happening. And then the book, which I took, minus basically the last 2 chapters, is more of a historical approach with insight from people inside the company. And so there's a little bit of difference, but it's not as much, I think, as some people are pointing out in the way we did reporting.
I actually
And so
don't
with
see
that,
any difference.
I'm going to
But
take a
it's
drink
okay.
and turn it over to Paul.
Yeah, I'm not going to go on for too long. I just, here's the thing. This is the Surface thing was an interesting one for me because what people maybe need to understand now that we can kind of look back on it is that I had the highest possible sources at Microsoft telling me what was happening while it was happening, right, in the fall of that year. So whatever year that the Surface Pro 4 and Surface Book were launched, I was fully engaged at the highest level, getting their side of the story, as it turns out. And the story I was told was that, and this, by the way, going off of memory is a dangerous thing for me. I kind of did bring up a couple of articles, which I posted into the forum thread. I didn't really read thoroughly through them, or even to this moment have a understanding of where I was in time. But Microsoft blamed Intel, right? I mean, basically. Later, the story became a little more nuanced, and it really is the fault of both companies in a way. And you know, one of the things that came out of this was that Microsoft, on day one of the release of these new products, supported a feature called Modern Standby, which did not work. And this was the thing that caused the hot bag incidents, right? It would never actually go into a sleep state. It only supported this Modern Standby. It didn't support the legacy standby hibernation modes. There's a story I was told, again, highest levels, of Microsoft CEO Satya Nadella going into a meeting with other CEOs, and he asked the CEO of Lenovo, "Hey, how are you guys handling this Skylake problem?" And he said, "What Skylake problem?" As it turns out, more mature and experienced PC makers like Lenovo and HP, and I have sources at HP have told me about this too, by the way, understood the problems with the Intel chipset, understood how this thing works because they've been dealing with Intel for years. There's always problems with every major new chipset family that comes out. And they did not support the Modern Standby at launch because it didn't work. They just supported the legacy standby modes. In one of those articles, I list the results of looking at what power management capabilities are available on different computers, and you can see it for yourself. That's a fact. So, you know, over time, obviously, I should say there's a side story here too. Microsoft was so incensed that Intel should ship a buggy chipset, even though, again, they had been doing this their entire existence. That they privately and then publicly threatened and then did not support Windows 7 and Windows 8 X on Skylake as a punishment to Intel, because Intel was like, "This is your job. You have to fix this." And Microsoft, the Windows team in particular, said we would have to shut down active development of Windows 10 for a year for that to happen. We can't do that. We have to do this together. This is your job. You made the chipset. You got to fix it. And you know, there's a lot of stuff came out of this. Windows 10 on ARM directly is because Terry Myerson wants to get what he said, those effing Intel Inside stickers off of laptops. He hated Intel for this episode. That's why Windows 10 on ARM exists, by the way.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of information there, but like you said, this all happened at the time. As it turns out, there are two sides to every story, and there's an Intel side of the story as well, and that doesn't look too good for Microsoft. So the more nuanced version of this is no one is not culpable for this.
Right.
Like, this was just a cluster F of epic proportions on both sides of the fence. And the difference between Microsoft and, say, the HPs and Lenovo's of the world is that they were too immature at the time as a PC maker to understand how to deal with this properly. But their response to their audience, to their customers, was completely wrong.
Right.
And that's why I wrote the SurfaceGate article early the following year, because they just said nothing. And then they had that idiot in the forum thing that said it was a hard computer science problem, and it was that whole nightmare. So that's my memory of the story, and a little bit of insight into the level at the company. I hope you understand what I mean by that. I was talking to.
I don't. I think people were more thinking this was more controversial than it really is, because I don't think there really was. Like, I read the thread and I was like, okay, and then I read some of what Paul wrote and I was like, okay, that makes, like, during the time.
I don't think it's contradictory at all. Yeah,
it makes sense. Like, you guys have to remember that. And I'm doing this right now with Xbox stuff. I guarantee, if you come back in 4 years and write a history of Xbox and look at some of the things I'm writing about xCloud, it's not going to be 100% accurate or perfect. But at the time, it is the best available information we have.
Because you have sources who are telling you information, and those sources are themselves in some way biased to their end of the equation.
eloquently put. I still want to punch you in the face, but
sure. Well, that was private discussion, Brett. But the
did I tweet it?
That's awesome. So I haven't been on Twitter yet. So that's funny. So now I need to recover from that. Give me a second. The other two things I just wanted to say with regards to this is I edited your book, as you know, and if I saw something in there that I thought was inaccurate, I would have flagged it and said, "Hey, what about this?" and blah blah blah. You know, so there's that. As written, I don't remember off the top of my head exactly how you described it, but I didn't find any issues with it. Like I said, I read it at least 3 times. I didn't say a thing, so that tells me. And I think you understand. I did a very thorough job of editing it. No one can claim I glossed over this. The other thing is, this book has a particular aim, and it's you're telling the story of the history of Surface, and there's no doubt that this is part of the history of Surface. I mean, it is, and the problems that Microsoft got itself into with those 2 devices led to a cascading effect that included Consumer Reports almost a year later, or whatever the time frame was, taking away their recommendation for Surface products because they have a feedback loop with their own readers. It takes some time for that to happen. Unsurprisingly, people who bought Surface devices that past year did not have good experiences.
Yep.
We, as reviewers, had these experiences. Remember the early Surface books we got? It was, I still have one here. It's probably heating my basement right now. They're unusable, right? We heard whatever we heard from PR. They sent us like special keys with new software images, and
yep. I still use those keys, by the way, because they were excellent thumb drives.
And they have they have nice logos, and they're nice. I still have them too. The one with the little hole loop on them.
Yep.
Yeah. So it's funny. I have them as well. Look, I mean, at some point when you're telling the story like you are of this thing, I mean, I guess we could get bogged down in all of the technical minutia of whatever, but again, without actually remembering exactly the way you described it, I was like, this is the right way to handle this because we're kind of moving this along. When I think back on your book, I mean, I think the only time I ever, and it wasn't like a disagreement so much as it was, I thought maybe something should be more emphasized was maybe around the Windows 8 stuff and how bad it was, right? Yeah. And I think I slipped in a couple of things like, hey, maybe this should, be highlighted a little bit more because this was the problem or whatever. But when I read I think that might have been it, honestly, in the whole thing. But anyway, when I read this part of it, I was like, yeah, no, this is, this is what happened.
Yeah. And I mean, I don't know if there's any specific lines people want us to defend. I'm happy to do it, but
yes, we'll do it. Well, we'll do a line by line reading, and we'll tear it apart.
Yeah. Well, speaking of that, we eventually maybe will. Paul and I talked about this yesterday. People have been asking for this. Now, granted, this is going to be on the premium side, so batten down your hatches of hatred before I say this. But we are going to do a commentary of the book, and it's going to start possibly as early as next week, but it's going to be a chapter by chapter basis, and at some point we will get to the Skylake part. And at that point, we can.
So, but to be clear, it's an oral commentary, right?
Yes.
We're not going to write it down.
No. I've done enough writing on this.
Yeah, and whatever the schedule is exactly, something that takes place over a long period of time. But what my plan for it would be to, we'll schedule whatever the chapter is. We're going to talk about this chapter on this day. Like I'll read it again right before, take some notes,
Yep.
And kind of approach it almost like a director's
that's exactly
commentary or whatever. Yeah.
And that's that. So be on the lookout for that if that makes you happy in places that shouldn't make you happy, but that's coming.
That's not really our job, but hey, bonus.
That's what we're here for.
Apparently.
Oh, other things going on. Amazon claims over 30 million Fire TV users.
Yeah.
Did they? I haven't read this. I literally just read the title right now, but I'm going to guess that they didn't tell us monthly users, did they?
No, they didn't use that term. They said literally active users. Actually, the way they said it was like well over 30. So I take that to mean 31. I mean, if it was 35, they would have said 35.
Right.
You know what I mean? So it's got to be between 30 and 34, something like that.
we've got that
And
going on. There's a couple new phones that nobody really, I shouldn't say nobody cares about, but
well, yeah, we'll see. Yeah, I'm having a hard time getting excited about phones these days. Although I think I mentioned this in passing. This Huawei Mate Pro 20 is actually pretty freaking amazing. And it is a crime that you can't buy these things from carriers in the United States. It's just unfortunate.
the other thing, this actually caught me by surprise. I don't know if anybody else watched this. I certainly did. The AMD CES press conference yesterday, mostly because there were some tweets out there that Panos was in the audience. Then we also actually saw Phil Spencer on stage. They didn't really talk about anything. It was more of them just kind of like a rah-rah where we built the Xbox chips for the last couple generations. They didn't explicitly say that the next generation's built on AMD, but it was implied. I mean, why else would he be on stage talking about next gen consoles with the AMD CEO if they weren't the ones building it?
It's not going to be an ARM device.
Yeah. The one thing that they did announce, which I find kind of interesting, they announced the AMD Radeon 7, which is just a new graphics card, but it's built on 7 nanometers. But the important thing here, and this is the only thing that matters, is that if you were interested in buying a RTX, I almost said GTX, RTX 2080, you now have an option from Team Red that, according to them, granted, take it with a grain of salt, is on the same performance level. Now, granted, it does not have ray tracing, if that matters to you in the slightest, and it shouldn't.
Right. I was equally interested to see them introduce a 7 nanometer CPU too, right? Wasn't that part of their?
Yeah, they were talking about all sorts of 7 nanometer stuff. Now, the weird thing here is, and I got some interesting.
Is it 7 asterisk nanometers?
Well, it's like, so apparently, and I am going to butcher this because this is way above my knowledge base, at least to some extent, that the way people measure 7 nanometers or 10 nanometers differs how Intel measures it versus how Qualcomm and AMD measure it. So,
Seems like it's an absolute measurement, but
right, because it's just like the MacBook Air. How thin is it? Well, do you measure it at the tip, or do you measure it back by the ports? That's two different measurements, but it's the same device. So, yeah, if Intel will come and say like, this doesn't mean anything, and then AMD will be like, yeah, we were there first, and Qualcomm, it's we're talking 3 nanometers at this point.
I need to look into this more myself. This is not something that I'm very well educated on either. So I'm going to look into this. All I looked at was some blurbs and some headlines, and I thought, well, this is kind of interesting. AMD's been pretty quiet, I think, since their last major processor generation release. And, a lot of the talk about the future of computing has involved Intel and ARM, or Qualcomm in particular, but, and, Apple, of course, with the A-series stuff, but not AMD, right? So I'll look into this. This is kind of an interesting.
Their next gen Ryzen stuff, which come out later this year, and a whole bunch of stuff. I mean, they're a viable option by all means. Now, it used to be for a while, it was like AMD, but now it's I think where AMD loses is that Intel typically dominates the extreme outlier scenarios of performance. Right? They have the highest end graphics card, which AMD does not have a competitor to the 2080 Ti. They don't have a competitor to their super high-end gaming chips. But to that point, AMD makes chips for where most of them are sold. And that was their point on stage, is like, look, our last generation GPUs, we didn't have the most powerful one, but we had the best value for 1080p gaming. And that's where most graphics cards are sold. So
that's always been the AMD thing for the most part. I mean, I know for a brief while they were going after the high end, but that was my very first PC, which I built myself, was built on an AMD at the time. I think it was a 386SX, if I remember correctly. And the reason I bought it is because it was so much less expensive than the Intel equivalent. And at the time, and this is a really vague memory, but it was like you could get like a 40 megahertz AMD chip, 386SX equivalent, where the Intel one was stuck at 25 megahertz or something. So it was like cheaper, and it was like, maybe faster. I don't know if maybe the megahertz is like the nanometers where they didn't exactly measure up equally, but it was a better value. And I still have that notion of AMD in my head. And, we just had a discussion, I think, about Intel in the low end in the future, and Ice Lake, and this AMD is already playing to the strength that Intel needs to work at. which is the mainstream market, which is the biggest part of the market.
Yeah.
So yeah, they might be good. They might be well placed. I don't really know, to be honest.
I did have this. This is terrible. Like this just showed up on Slick Deals. I had this, and there is no justification for this. What I'm about to say, none. There's no financial justification. There's no performance justification in my house. But I really want to put like a rack-mounted server in my basement and hardwire everything up and have a nice proper NAS. And I think
strongly recommend not doing that.
I really want to. I know there's my mesh network.
I used to have a rack-mounted server in my cellar, and it was literally a rack-mounted server. The center of it was I think it was an HP, what was then a Windows storage server. And I'm sure at the time it was like an incredible 1 terabyte of storage across various. I don't remember, but this thing required so much power that you had to plug in 2 power connectors just for the one. I don't know what you call it, like a server blade or server rack, whatever, the one drawer or whatever. And it sounded like a jet engine going off all the time. That's right. So you could hear it down. Like I'd be in my office and I could hear it's like, and I know they're more efficient now, but I don't know. Like I have this little WD NAS. You can't really see, but like kind of this big. It's not. It's a little guy. It connects with an Ethernet port and a power cable. And I'm sure if you bought one today, they would be far more efficient and smaller. But I don't. I mean, I barely even need it.
I don't need. I want to be explicitly clear. I don't need any of this. Like, for example, this machine we're talking on right now is hardwired into my router. My Xbox One X is hardwired into the router, and my PC upstairs that I do daily stuff on is hardwired in. My Apple TV in the living room is hardwired in, but my Apple TV in the bedroom is not. There's no reason for this. Let me be clear. Like, this is a total waste of time. There is no reason that I need to do this, but I really, really want. I don't know.
Oof.
Yeah.
I think you need to work on that extension to your house and see what falls out of that.
Well, see, that's kind of the idea. Is like, man, if they're ripping this house apart, like I could
you could build something, like build a cabinet for it as part of it.
Yeah, I could get some cable. I'd have an opportune time to run Cat 5 or Cat 6 or whatever, or Dead Cats. I don't know what cat we're up to anymore.
Sure.
So, if my wife watches this, just pay no attention to the man behind the mirror. This is
right. Yeah. Well, she's not watching it live because the power didn't get cut off.
Although, funny enough, if people are listening and they heard the little Skype blurb, because I forgot to put myself on Do Not Disturb, it was actually my wife messaging me on Skype.
Okay. Hopefully not about this topic.
No. About something just very not important.
It's like when you're done with that, we need to have a little chat.
Yeah. Actually,
other words you don't want to see appearing on screen.
It's probably more along the lines of, so I see you bought 2 cameras, but not the doorbell thing I wanted.
Yeah, this is the problem when you marry a smart woman, Brad. You can't. Yeah,
they catch on. They catch on.
I know. I just had my here's how the budget went for 2018 chat with my wife. It's a miracle we're still married.
Oh gosh. Oh, and one very random question. Probably some people were asking how the cut on my hand went that I sliced myself open. Appears to be healing fine. I don't think I have any sort of diseases. I put antibacteria stuff on it the day it happened, and the following day, and it appears to be just fine.
Good.
Yeah. Now that we got that out of the way, you got anything else for today, Mr. Paul?
Well, I briefly want to address the forum topic that occurred today. I'm going to write about this and ask Paul tomorrow. This is so much to this, it's kind of hard to even express. But, back in the end of December when Chris Capicella told Mary Jo and Leo and I privately that he wanted to do a giveaway on the site, Mary Jo and Leo bailed on it like immediately. And I was the only one left that would agree to do this. And I do giveaways, so I know what this is like. It's a lot like the CS experience. You go, it's terrible. You hate yourself for doing it. And then a year later, you're like, oh, maybe, And I've done the easy part of the giveaway so far, which is the product keys. It's a little bit of work, but, again, it's digital. I don't have to go to the post office or make anything happen. So it's and you make, whatever. We made 10, 20, I guess 20 people happy, and it worked out great. So I've heard from everybody. Everyone's got their keys. I have heard nothing of problems or whatever. I assume it's all working. It's good. The hardware is more complicated. There are tax implications. There's out-of-pocket costs, and there's the difficulty of packaging each of these things. And I have a vast experience with shipping stuff to Europe, and nothing but problems doing that. And so when we announced that this giveaway on the first show, which was December, whatever that was, 20th or something, I said, look, the codes are going to be worldwide, but the hardware is going to be U.S. only. And then I got a lot of feedback from people, many of whom were willing to pay for the postage themselves, which is I get. Some people noted that shipping to Canada isn't all that onerous, and actually that's true. And so I kind of agreed to I'll go to the effort to make it happen. If someone's from Canada, it will be U.S. and Canada. But we have communicated the schedule and the ongoing milestones of these giveaways several times on the site, and every time I've mentioned anything about the hardware, I've said, remember, this is going to be U.S. Canada now only. And the hardware arrived Tuesday, I think. And so yesterday, I said the hardware's here. We're going to do it. This thing is for Windows Weekly viewers, many of whom are worldwide. I get that, and I want to make sure that people who listen to the show later don't miss out on it, but in a reasonable way, right? Like, in other words, I didn't start the giveaway on Wednesday because not everyone watches it live. So what I'm going to do is start it today at about 1 o'clock, and I'm going to run the thing through Friday through at least 1 o'clock. I'm going to think about that one a little bit because we do the show live at 1. I was kind of half thinking it'd be cool to announce the winners on the show live, but it's going to be too tight to make that happen. So I'm going to think about this one a little bit. I might even let it run for 48 hours, but in my post at 1 today, I will explain the time frame. Like I've done it every step of the way. But with regards to the international shipping, there was a premium subscriber who canceled his subscription because this giveaway, which has nothing to do with Thurrott Premium, is only going to be available to people in the United States and Canada. And he kind of shat all over me in ways that I kind of didn't appreciate. But the problem is, just to clear up what's happening here, I am going to pay for the shipping. It's expensive. And I do intend to submit this as an expense to work and get paid back. I agreed to do this thing to Microsoft, but I can't come back to work with hundreds of dollars of shipping fees, and which they never agreed to. It has to be reasonable for them as well, for our company, right? For one thing. But the thing is, I have a rich history of problems shipping stuff to Europe. I was talking to my wife about this, and I realized I don't have to tell you any stories from the past. I can tell you the two most recent stories, which are very recent. One is that Mehdi got Google to send him review units of a Pixelbook and something else. And they shipped it to London from the United States for some reason, even though he was in contact with Google UK. And then it got stuck in customs. And he pinged me and he said, hey, I have to pay. I don't remember the exact fee. I think it was £150 or £250. And I said, okay. I said, do you have an expense account, where you can charge it back to work? And he's like, no. And I said, I'll pay it then. And so I paid for that, and I expensed it back to work, and I got paid back. But there's like a 30-day delta on that. I'm giving the company a loan basically when I do this kind of thing. And well, is that true? No, I'm giving the credit. What am I giving a loan to? Well, whatever I'm doing, but I'm paying it for it out of pocket. But the other one was, we go on a home swap every year. And one of the things we do on the home swap is we exchange keys. So we send them a car key with our house key on it through the mail. We do it well in advance so that they get it, right? And they do the same. The idea is that if we don't get to meet each other in person, which could happen for any variety of reasons, A, it's just the scheduling, it's never going to happen, or B, there's delays with flights and whatever. And this all goes back to an incident years and years ago when Stephen Bink and I were doing a home swap. And he was flying from Amsterdam, and the windshield of the plane got a crack, and he had to turn around halfway across the ocean, go all the way back, get the plane. It was, it delayed his flight a day. And we almost didn't get to meet each other, and we were going to hand each other keys. So this past year in August, the key for our car never arrived in Sweden. Never, it never left customs in the United States. at least during the entire time we were in the country. And we had to scramble to figure it out. It's a long story. Nobody cares how we made it work, but we did. And we actually didn't get that key back until November. So we only had one key for our car for that entire time. And it was just a nightmare. And when I say complexity and cost, what I'm referring to is that kind of thing, plus all the customs paperwork I have to fill out, the potential tax implications of me shipping things worth a certain dollar amount internationally. I'm talking about the fact that these things sometimes don't arrive, that they sometimes will get held up in customs in some foreign country for us. I'm not trying to be a jerk. This guy said that this proves that I don't care about, I don't know if it was Europeans or Europe or something like that. Guys, I specifically spend 30 days of every year, at least in Europe, on purpose, by design. I plan it that way. I don't consider a year to be successful unless I spend more than a month in Europe. I care about Europe deeply. There's no reward for
he's moving to Paris, by the way.
I wish I could right now. Like if I could right now, I would. I'm sorry. I am not sending these things to Europe. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
That's just one of the limitations of me being the guy who agreed to do this giveaway. And I'm sorry. But my God, like what a terrible personal reaction.
Yeah.
To me trying to be nice to people.
I mean, realistically, what he said is just don't ever do giveaways and just don't. If I can't benefit, nobody else is allowed to. And I will tack on one thing because we could drill on international shipping. My book sold worldwide, and I shipped a bunch of them personally. We ended up finding a better way of doing it, but there's a bunch of it I did, and two books are just gone. Like I don't know where.
No, that's
they
what
are.
happens.
One went to Australia, and the other one went to Europe, and they never arrived.
That's the thing. This has happened to me multiple times because I've done tons of device giveaways and then sometimes sell devices depending on what they are. They disappear. They just disappear.
Mm-hmm.
And imagine the sticky situation we get into. Microsoft has given me, I think it's about $5,000 worth of hardware. $600 worth of it disappears. Did Paul steal it? How does anyone know what really happened, right? The goal for me is that people are going to get these things. They're all new and shrink wrapped. They're never been touched. You can tell, and that's the condition I want those things to arrive in. I don't have any designs on them myself. Yep. I'm not going to open any of them. I don't want any of them. We got those stupid sweaters that we're also going to give away. Mary Jo and I, that is, they were given to us. I don't know what to say to people. I mean, I don't. There's no winning here. I mean, and this is why I hate doing this kind of thing. It's the reminder. It's like when you get to Vegas for CS, you're like, oh yeah, this is why I hate coming here because it's here.
Yep.
It's sad. It's just upsetting.
Wow, this is very dangerous. I'm looking at Amazon right now.
Jesus Christ.
120, but just bear with me here for a second. SanDisk, 128 gigabyte micro SD XS or XC card. How much do you think a 128 gigabyte SD card costs you these days?
Is this the successor to micro SD? Is that what that is?
Yeah, like the real tiny one.
It's shaped like micro SD, but it's faster. Is that what this is?
This one's like the size of like a SIM card.
Oh, so it's even smaller.
Yeah, the micro SD XC.
So it would need like a micro SD adapter to use it in your phone because it's so small.
Yeah, I think it's. Well,
okay,
I'll show a picture of it.
128 gigabytes.
Yeah.
Actually, I don't think it's going to be that much because you can get crazy amounts of something. $30, $35.
$22.50 delivered.
Yeah.
I mean, that's nothing. That's...
I'm going to spend that much at KFC today. I wish.
I'll tell you what, though, I had some egg rolls yesterday.
Did you see my awesome egg picture this morning?
No, I did not.
I made poached eggs today. 5 minutes. Perfect.
I could go for a nice omelet for lunch, like a little spinach and cheese omelet. I haven't had one of those in a while. All right, you got anything else for today, Paul, before we, No,
I'm just going to sit here in a fragile mental state for the rest of the day, thanks to this post, and try to remind myself why I do anything. because sometimes I just don't know.
Yeah.
How about you? How are you going to spend your day, Brad?
Well, there was a disastrous Windows 7 patch that went out that is breaking some machines, so I need to look into that and write that up for the Petries. I also have something, maybe I should put it up on Threat too. Just gotten a ton of questions about xCloud and whatnot, and just did a little thing, and so, yeah.
There you go. That's a good idea.
Yeah. So.
Cool.
What is today? Today is Thursday, right?
Yep.
So what that means, folks, is that tomorrow's show will be live. Hopefully not a disaster, but it will be live at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. You can find that information on Threat.com. You can subscribe to the YouTube channel and make sure you're notified and all that other stuff that marketing people want me to say. Otherwise, have yourselves a wonderful Thursday, and we'll catch you back here next time.